All right, let's get into it. Today we're talking about one of the most audacious, desperate, and believe it or not, game-changing missions in all of World War II. This is a story born from America's darkest hour, a time when the only plan they had left was an impossible one.
And yeah, this quote just nails the feeling at the time. We're talking early 1942. The situation was beyond grim. I mean, it's hard to really wrap your head around the pressure, that constant feeling of defeat, and then to think about the sheer guts it took for these 80 men to raise their hands for a mission that, on paper, looked like a one-way ticket.
So, to really get why this raid even happened, you have to understand the absolute desperation that created it. Let's set the scene, okay? It's the winter of 1941, going into 42.
Now look at the pace here. Pearl Harbor wasn't just a single event. It kicked off a total tidal wave of disaster. For months, it was just a relentless stream of bad news. The Japanese military looked completely invincible, just sweeping across the Pacific. You can imagine, American morale was in the basement.
So, right in the middle of all this chaos, President Roosevelt makes a demand that sounds, frankly, impossible. Hit them back. Not on some remote island, but hit their home islands. The problem? I mean, just picture a map of the Pacific Ocean. It is massive. The U.S. had 0 air bases anywhere close enough to launch an attack on Japan. The request was a strategic and logistical nightmare. Or so it seemed.
So, when you're faced with an impossible problem, sometimes you need an impossible solution. And the idea they came up with was so far out of the box, it was almost ridiculous. Let's launch huge, twin-engine Army bombers from an aircraft carrier. Now, you have to understand, that had never, ever been done before. And the way this idea even started is just pure chance. It all begins with a Navy submariner, of all people, just watching Army planes practice on land. He has this crazy what-if moment, and somehow that idea filters all the way up the chain of command, and suddenly this wild thought is being secretly tested. The B-25 Mitchell was the plane. It was powerful, but just small enough to maybe, just maybe, work. And when 2 of them actually lifted off the deck of the USS Hornet, well, the impossible suddenly became merely improbable.
Now, for a mission this insane, you don't just need a pilot, you need a genius. And that's where Jimmy Doolittle comes in. This guy was a living legend. He wasn't just some daredevil air racer. He also had a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT. So he understood the cold, hard science of flight better than almost anyone. He was the absolute master of the calculated risk, the perfect and maybe only person to lead a mission with 0 room for error.
All right, so with Doolittle in charge, things shift into high gear. Now they have to figure out how to turn this barely possible idea into a real workable plan. And it's going to take some incredible innovation and a whole lot of guts.
Just look at what they had to do to these B-25s. This wasn't just a simple tune-up. This was radical surgery. They ripped out everything they possibly could to save weight. Gun turrets, heavy radios, armor plating. And why? To cram in every last drop of fuel possible. They added 3 extra fuel tanks, basically turning these bombers into flying gas cans for what everybody knew was a one-way trip.
And this is where the genius gets really scrappy. Their standard bomb site, the Norden, was a top-secret marvel, but it was totally useless for the low-level bombing run they had planned. So one of the pilots just invents a new one, out of scrap metal. It cost 20 cents to make, and it was more accurate for their needs. And the best part? The solution for the now unprotected tail gunner position? They literally took 2 broomsticks, painted them black to look like machine guns, and stuck them out the back. Incredible.
Doolittle was brutally honest with his crew. He got all the volunteers together and he laid it out plain and simple. This mission is unbelievably dangerous. He gave every single man a chance to walk away, right then and there, no judgment. And in what is just an incredible testament to their character, not one of them did.
Okay, so the planes are ready, the crews are trained to perfection, and the whole task force is steaming across the Pacific in total radio silence. The plan is to launch at dusk, about 450 miles from Japan. Simple enough, but as we know, war almost never goes according to plan.
And here it is. Disaster. Hours before they're supposed to launch, way farther out at sea, they get spotted by a Japanese patrol boat. The American ships sink it, but not before the patrol boat radios a warning back to Japan. The element of surprise? Gone. Just gone. And now the commander of the task force, Admiral Halsey, has an agonizing choice. Turn back and call the whole thing off, or launch the planes right now, knowing the odds just went from terrible to catastrophic.
Halsey gives the order, launch planes. Let's look at what that really meant. They're now launching from 650 miles out, hundreds of miles farther than planned. They're going to arrive over Japan in broad daylight, not under the cover of darkness. And the biggest problem of all, they now almost certainly do not have enough fuel to reach the friendly airfields in China. A mission that was already incredibly dangerous had just become, for all intents and purposes, suicidal.
Oh, and as if things weren't bad enough, they had to take off in the middle of a raging storm, with huge waves crashing over the flight deck. But here's the wild irony. That storm is what saved them. The carrier was steaming full speed into a gale force headwind. That combination created such a powerful wind over the deck that these overloaded bombers only needed to get up to about 20 miles per hour on their own to get airborne. Without that storm, they might have just plunged right into the sea. And against all of those odds, every single one of the 16 planes makes it into the air. Led by Doolittle himself, they flew just feet above the waves to stay under any radar and descended on a completely stunned Japan. They hit their military and industrial targets in Tokyo and other cities, causing chaos and confusion before banking southwest toward China in a totally unknown fate. So the raid itself, it was over in just a few hours, but its real impact, the reason we are still talking about this today, has almost nothing to do with the actual physical damage they caused. It's all about what happened next. And the price they paid was immense. Just as they feared, not a single one of the 16 bombers survived. Most of the crews had to either crash land or bail out over China in the dark in that storm. Out of the 80 men who set out, many were captured, some were executed, and others died. It was just a brutal, brutal ending to an already harrowing journey.
But this is the whole point. The raid was a massive psychological victory. For Americans at home, it was the first piece of good news they'd had all war, a real sign that they could fight back. For Japan, it was a profound national humiliation. Their military leadership became obsessed with making sure another raid could never happen. And that obsession led them to make a fatal strategic error. They changed their naval plans to try and extend their defensive perimeter, and in doing so, they sailed their fleet right into an American trap at the Battle of Midway a few months later. That battle crippled the Japanese Navy and completely turned the tide of the war in the Pacific.
Admiral Halsey, the man who made that tough call to launch, he summed it up perfectly. The strategic result was huge, yeah, but the sheer human courage on display that day, that was something else entirely. It was bravery personified.
So we end with this question, right? Because the Doolittle Raid is a total paradox. On paper, it was a failure. Every single plane was lost. But strategically and psychologically, it was one of the most successful operations of the entire war. It just goes to show you that sometimes victory isn't measured by what you destroy, but by the chain of events you set in motion. A pretty powerful lesson from one of history's most incredible gambles.